Based on the currently available data, the Commission on Human Medicines is advising the following. First, pregnant women should continue to discuss with their healthcare professional whether the benefits of having the vaccine outweigh the risks for them. Number two, people with a history of blood disorders that increase the risk of clotting should only have the COVID-19 vaccine AstraZeneca when the benefits outweigh any potential risks. Number three, anyone who experienced cerebral or other major blood clots occurring together with low levels of platelets after the first vaccine of COVID-19 AstraZeneca should not have the second dose. We will be continually monitoring further reports as they come in, continuing monitoring other aspects to identify risk factors so that we can refine the advice that we give. At present, the data on people who've had 2 doses of the COVID-19 AstraZeneca vaccine are limited because these events are rare and comparatively small number of second doses have been given. Therefore, it is not possible to draw a conclusion about how frequently blood clots with a low platelet count happen following a second dose of the vaccine. But this will be monitored closely by the MHRA and by the CHM as part of the ongoing review. So just to put into context, these events are extremely rare, as June has already mentioned, and I want to put it into context in relation to COVID-19 itself. It is important to remember that COVID-19 itself causes clotting and it causes lowered platelets. And I've got a few figures from a paper which is recently published. Pulmonary embolus, clots on the lungs, occur in 7.8% of people who have COVID-19. DVT, deep venous thrombosis, clots in the legs, occur in 11.2% who've had COVID-19. And of those people who've been infected with SARS-CoV-2, getting COVID-19 and ending up in ITU, 23% will have some form of clot. COVID-19 also causes strokes in about 1.6%. And up to 30% of people who develop COVID-19 will get thrombocytopenia, which is lowering of the platelet count. And that puts into context that the risk of clots and lowered platelet is much higher with COVID-19 than these extremely rare events which are occurring with the vaccine. So to finish off, the CHM has advised that the link between the vaccine and blood clots in the cerebral and other veins occurring together with lowered platelets is getting firmer, but absolute proof of the link between the vaccine and adverse events will need extensive scientific work. Based on the currently available evidence, and that the benefit risk remains favourable for the vast majority of people, but as June said, is more finely balanced for the younger people. And we are advising that this evolving evidence should be taken into account when considering the use of the vaccine. I'll hand back to Professor Van Tam.
Thank you, Professor Sermonier. Thank you, Professor Raine. You've now heard from the regulatory experts, and in a moment I will turn to the new advice from the JCVI with Professor Lim. But before we do that, I'd like to put into context in a visual way what the data are telling us in terms of benefits and risks. So if I could have the first slide, please. So this slide, and I'll go through the first one slowly, shows you in blue type to the left of the slide the potential benefits from COVID-19 vaccination, and on the orange part to the right the potential harms. And you can see that as you go down the slide from top to bottom, those benefits and potential harms are arrayed by age band, starting at 20 to 29, young adults, through to 60 to 69, relatively old adults. And the way these data have been arrayed are in terms of intensive care admissions prevented via vaccine on the left, and serious harms potentially due to the vaccine on the right. And I thank colleagues at the Winton Centre for Risk and Evidence Communication at Cambridge University for help with getting this slide together. And this first slide is set, as you can see from the title, in a scenario of low exposure. And in actual fact, the rates of disease assumed in this scenario are lower than those we currently have in the UK at the moment. And you can see that if you look at the 20 to 29 age band, then the potential benefits amount to 0.8 ICU admissions averted, compared with serious harms of potentially 1.1. But as you go up through the age groups, the amount of serious harm declines, but the amount of benefit in terms of averted ICU admissions becomes much more pronounced. And these are arrayed over a 16-week period. Now, we don't expect vaccine to last for 16 weeks. We very confidently expect that it is going to be many, many months of protection from a vaccine. And the reason for using 16 weeks is because that is a typical pandemic wave. That's the duration of it. But you can see that at a very low exposure risk, lower than we have in the UK at the moment, the risk benefit is relatively finely balanced in those younger age groups, but it becomes very overwhelming in favour of vaccine as you go down up the ages. If we go on to the next slide, please. This is now a medium risk scenario, and it is set at 60 cases per 100,000. That is marginally higher than the UK average at the moment, but it is lower than some of the remaining hotspots in the UK. And you can see that when the disease is around us more, when there's more exposure, then the benefits, the potential benefits, start to stack up, but the potential serious harms remain static, of course. And this is still over a 16-week period, and you can see that the data become more overwhelming in terms of vaccine benefit. Finally, let's move to a high exposure risk, and this one, next slide please, is set typically at where we get to in terms of a pandemic wave. This is set at the height of the second pandemic wave that we went through in the last few months, and I think is reflective of the kind of scenario we want to avoid in the forthcoming autumn and winter if we possibly can. But here, when there's a lot of COVID-19 circulating in the population, you can see that even in the 20 to 29 group, the potential benefits in terms of intensive care, admissions averted, is very much higher than the serious harms due to vaccine. And that's why the regulators have concluded, as they have, about risk-benefit for the AstraZeneca vaccine. So I hope that's placed it all into a bit of context for everybody, so that I recognise it's been a detailed scientific discussion so far, but hopefully those figures bring it to life. And at this point, I'm going to hand over to Professor Lim to give us the JCVI advice. Thank you, Wei Shen.
Thank you, Jonathan. JCVI has been meeting over the last 2 weeks, and we have carefully and independently reviewed the safety evidence and the benefit evidence given to us from MHRA and Public Health England. And that includes some of the kinds of data that you've seen earlier on the slide. We are well aware of the high level of protection that COVID-19 vaccines provide, particularly against serious disease, that is hospitalization, ITU admission, and from dying from COVID-19 disease. Against that must be balanced the uncertain occurrence of an extremely rare adverse event that may be associated with vaccination. Acting really in the interest of safety and for public benefit, JCVI feel that there are 3 points of advice that we would like to put across. The first is that information given to individuals who are being offered vaccination and information given to health professionals should be appropriately updated to reflect the latest considerations and deliberations by JCVI and by MHRA. The second point is that those who have received their first dose of AstraZeneca vaccine should continue to be offered the second dose of AstraZeneca vaccine according to the set schedule. And the final bit of advice is that adults who are aged 18 to 29 years old who do not have an underlying health condition that puts them at higher risk from serious COVID-19 disease should be offered an alternative COVID-19 vaccine in preference to the AstraZeneca vaccine where such an alternative vaccine is available. And perhaps it's useful to state what is not advised as well. We are not advising a stop to any vaccination for any individual in any age group. We are advising a preference for one vaccine over another vaccine for a particular age group, really out of the utmost caution rather than because we have any serious safety concerns.